I tend not to be interested in celebrity gossip. I find it a bit vacuous, tabloidish. I'm not interested in it. However, particular celebrity plural, I'm talking about, I think there are actually implications for the British royal family, the royal institution, and that is something that goes a bit beyond just tabloid gossip and, tabloid fodder. And I am, of course, talking about Harry and Meghan. So, on the James Corden show, I didn't watch the whole show, I've just seen this from MSN News. Harry was actually, just Harry wasn't with Meghan. He was on a bus with James Corden going through Los Angeles, presumably one of the suburban areas, with a cup of China tea. Now, this was quite a bizarre sight. I mean, when you break this down, what is this? This is a former member of the British royal family going through Los Angeles sipping a cup of tea. It's almost like he was deliberately playing up British stereotypes, which is fine. I have no problem with that. I think it's quite entertaining, quite a sight. Um, but the thing about Harry and Meghan, it's become really like in a sense, it's our equivalent of people have often joked, if that's the right word, that American politics is like a big drama show, America season one, America season two, and so on, because their politics have been so chaotic and fractious over the last couple of years. But in a sense, the Harry and Meghan saga is our equivalent. Brexit's over, so it's kind of the Harry and Meghan saga. I I still have very mixed views on the whole thing. I mean, on one hand, I do think that they were under enormous pressure. I don't really accept the whole racist claim, because whilst there may have been a few pockets of unpleasant views towards Meghan, um, as the tabloids said, and it's very rare I defend the tabloids, but they were right to point out that actually, with that royal wedding in 2018, they were very, very supportive. And this is something that loads of us critical of the tabloids, I guess, need to be fair about, which is that, you know, they were very supportive of that event. They actively promoted it. They had, extensive coverage of it. That is something that Harry and Meghan wanted. Um, there is a bit of a situation here, I think, that you get with other celebrities. It's a bit like when you get a singer or an actor in an interview and they want the whole thing scripted. They only want the questions that they want. Now, in my opinion, a good journalist, a good presenter, will ask some challenging questions. I don't think it should be the point of being cruel or questions that are totally inappropriate. So, for example, I made a video recently about the David Letterman interviews. I think Letterman goes too far, and I think that pushing Lindsay Lohan on her addiction, I think that was a bit below the belt. I thought that was wrong. However, I also think if you have the glamour of a celebrity lifestyle, the privilege, and I'm using the word privilege here, notwithstanding my previous thoughts on that word, but if you have that glamorous lifestyle, you've a very, you're rich, you're leading a glamorous lifestyle. It's hard work. It's a hard slog, acting, singing. In the case of actors, a constant rehearsals. In the case of singers, constant tours. It, it's it's a challenging life, but it's a good life. So with that, um, I think some actors, some celebrities get into a diva mindset, both male and female, where they feel that, how dare he ask that, or how dare she ask that. People need to remember that journalists have a job to do. And, you get the fanboys and fangirls. Maybe I'm detracting from the point here, but I'll get back to Harry and Meghan in a minute. You get fanboys and fangirls enraged that a journalist would dare to ask them that. But no one is above criticism. Now, I take the view if a celebrity has had some controversy, I think it's totally legitimate for a journalist to raise those questions. Just because they don't want to talk about it doesn't mean that it's not legitimate. So I will defend journalists doing that if it's done professionally and tactfully. I wouldn't support gotcha style moments, but something along the lines of, look, I have to ask this. You have been involved in some controversy recently. What's your take on this? If the celebrity's like, oh, I'm not talking about that, then I would, as a journalist, I would follow up and say, well, that's your right, but people will want to know this, and I would push it because that would be my job. So I find that fanboys and fangirls, they cannot handle their idol being questioned, and it's something that I don't really, you know, respect, because no one is above criticism. Just because you don't like the question doesn't mean it's an illegitimate question. Um, so how does that tie into Harry and Meghan? It does, to an extent, because I do think a big problem here, and this is where a lot of the British public, if you look at any reports on this, the overwhelming majority of opinions are cynical, and I think the reason for that is because it's a case of wanting in both ways. Harry and Meghan have said that they're stepping down from the royal family, stepping down but not stepping away, as they put it. Fair enough. We're in the 21st century. They've got a right to privacy. I believe that. I believe every celebrity has some right to privacy. However, you can't have it both ways. You can't say we want privacy, but we want to do interviews that favour our agenda, whether it be particular causes they're promoting. It's well known that Meghan's very into woke activism or social causes, for if you think that's a derogatory term. And that's fine. They've a right to be. They've a right to have views on things. But I think a lot of people find it a bit aggravating that there's a slightly lecturing side to the way they go about things. Um, both Harry and Meghan, and this is something I think relatively new with Harry, because as a royal, he was always a bit of a colourful character. But I think and him and his brother were always quite. I think they always had a sort of social conscience and humanitarian conscience came from their mother. But I do feel that that's now morphed into a sort of woke, patronizing tone, which people don't like. But there's another side to it, or another angle to it. I think the British people sort of see them as hypocrites in the sense that they want to keep the perks of royal life. They want to be able to, Harry especially wants all his titles, um, and yet he's stepping down. You can't have it both ways. If you resign in normal life, if you resign from an organization or you step down from duties, even in the military or any other body of life, actually, you couldn't keep all the perks with it. Maybe in some companies would be a severance pay, which can be controversial, but um, you wouldn't be an ambassador of something and leave the organization and expect to still be in that ambassadorial role, right? It's the same principle. So I do think that Harry needs to sort of understand this. Also, he says that they want to get away from the press attention, yet they want the press when they want it, in their favor. They need the press when it's about reporting on his causes and so on. And I think, to be fair to the press, they have accommodated that. They have given both Harry and Meghan airtime to talk about issues that they feel passionately about. But then, they want it all cut off as soon as the questions turn into a different direction. Now, I do think that there's times the British press can be very seedy and sleazy in the way they go about things. I agree with that. And, I have a big problem with the way the tabloids conduct their business more often than not. Um, I was going to say doorstepping there. That doesn't really happen with the royals because you can't go up, you can't doorstep Buckingham Palace. Um, however, There's just a lot of things that don't make sense about this. I mean, you want to escape press attention, so you go to Los Angeles, probably the place on earth which it's most easy to be a paparazzi. That doesn't make any sense. So there's a lot of things that just don't add up. If they'd went to Toronto, if they'd settled in Toronto, that would be understandable. Because Toronto, as much as it's an important city, it doesn't quite have the same press focus, centrism as London or Los Angeles, especially not Los Angeles. You know, the paparazzi are more likely to be hanging around LA than they are Toronto. So why not settle in Toronto? There's a lot of questions about this. So on a human level, I have some sympathy with the amount of pressure they've been under, but at the same time, I don't think they've entirely won public support with some of their antics. You know, Harry can't have it both ways. He can't say we're stepping down from this role, but I feel that I want to keep all my military titles. Well, as an HRH, you've stepped down from that. So how can you still represent those things in full if you're no longer a full serving member of the royal family? Um, there's going to be a lot of awkward questions. Prince Philip's now 99, to put it bluntly, he's not going to be around forever. What happens when he passes? Um, it would be pretty cold if Harry didn't go to his grandfather's funeral. So, there's questions like that. Then, they'd have to come back to the UK, which would be understandable. Hopefully, the press will behave themselves and not be too, you know, make too big a thing of that. But this is the thing with royal life, and I guess this is where Republicans would say it's an anachronism in the third decade of the 21st century. I do think there's going to be a lot of question marks when the Queen goes. And, with the renewed focus on the royal family with the success of The Crown, incidentally, Harry has been very supportive of that. He says it's a pretty accurate portrayal, and he wants Damian Lewis, the actor Damian Lewis, to play him. But I think when the Queen goes, there are going to be a lot of questions about, as it stands, there's no indication that there's going to be a sort of leap in the succession. William's going to ascend and his father won't. There's no strong indication that that's going to happen. So obviously, there's going to be a lot more attention on Charles. What direction will he take the royal family? I think Charles is sort of an intermediary. He's not quite as modern and savvy as William. However, I think he's a very different style than his mother. So I think I personally see no reason why Charles will be a bad monarch. From what I've seen, um, I think he's actually quite a good communicator with the public. He was kind of cast as the villain in the whole Diana saga, and maybe he was, but frankly, I quite like the man, and I think he'll make a good king. But he is in his 70s, so he won't be monarch for very long. This country is facing real issues in terms of, SMP questions. There's a lot of things going on. So I do think we're in a particularly turbulent era, and that will only be made more so when the Queen passes. I think there will be some big questions around that. Having said that, I don't want to exaggerate because republicanism in the UK is still it's not a big thing. At most, it maybe has 30% approval at most. So it really doesn't have much of a mandate. Um, but time will tell. As for Harry and Meghan, I wish them well, but they have to understand that they can't have it both ways. And then they play the victim when there is criticism, and there is, in some courts, fierce criticism from people like Piers Morgan. They have to stop playing this game, because I think they are, on some level, damaging the institution on some level. And they've always said they didn't want to do that. Well, have some humility, and if you want to step down, then step down. Stop looking for interviews. Stop being in the press. Can't have it both ways. And this is not from a point of spite. I actually quite like them on some level. Um, I think their views are sincere, but they can't have it both ways. Let me know your thoughts.